We're up.
Hey everybody, welcome.
Welcome to JS Party.
Party!
This is a live recording.
And at a real party too, in person.
A legit party.
Yes, an after party, in fact, for Remix Conference.
Woo!
Super exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And I'm here with Ali. I'm Divya, and we are also here with Kent C. Dodds.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Yeah, Kent organized Remix Conf and also is part of like the Remix community. Do you want to talk more about Remix Conf? And
Yeah, I would love to talk more about RemixConf. So thank you so much for coming and being here at the conference. So Remix is a web framework. We talked at length about it a couple episodes ago, so you can go back and we'll link to that. Yeah, so it's a web framework for building awesome websites. And when I joined the team back in November, I thought we just should do a conference. I don't know. That was one of the first things that I did was start that up. We just barely open sourced, but I knew that that we had a good community going already with the closed source thing, and so I figured we could probably get 300 to 350 people in Salt Lake if I had the right team to organize a conference and put things together. So I got the right team, and we got the same group. It's Zero Slope Events, same group that does React Rally. They've done a couple React Conf, NG Conf, yeah, a bunch of tech conferences. They're amazing. We're in the same venue as React Rally has been in the past. Yeah, and we got 330-ish people at the conference. So pretty cool.
Awesome. That's awesome. That's actually really impressive turnaround on a conference too. I feel like these things take forever to plan. So 6 months or so is pretty impressive.
I feel actually pretty proud of that accomplishment. Yeah.
Pat yourself on the back for that. That's huge.
what made you guys want to have a conference in the first place, considering it's a project and you're building the community? So what was the impetus for that?
Yeah. So actually, I was thinking about a Remix conference before I even joined Remix. I was like, boy, it sure would be cool to have a Remix conference. 'Cause I've been using Remix before I joined for over a year, and I just loved it. I didn't want to talk about anything else. And so when I joined the team, this was after they'd gotten funded. And we just said, one of our primary goals was adoption. And Remix is basically an evolution of React Router. So we already have really good adoption. Basically 7 in 10 React apps are using React Router. So there's a lot. But we want also to just highlight what the community is doing with the server aspect of what React Router is, which is now Remix. So I think the idea was we wanted to get people together so that we could help them inspire each other to know what cool things that you can do with Remix, and also share some of the things that we've been working on. And that was Michael Jackson's keynote. Was just here's a bunch of things that we're working on, and now I'm done. Let's hand it off to the community. But yeah, this is definitely not a money maker for us or anything. We're just trying to highlight the community.
That's awesome. And I want to shout you out for doing a lot of unique things for this conference too, of having us go out into the city and get lunch in groups today. I thought that was really unique. I've never seen that at a conference before. And then having this event tonight and the hack and hang last night. So lots of really, really cool events. And I also really liked the single track, and the speakers were amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we borrowed a lot of ideas, and some of these ideas were my own. So I've been to a lot of conferences and a lot of things that I like and some things I don't like about the conferences. And so you'll notice we do have music, but you will still be able to hear other people talk when you're at this after party. Lots of conferences, it's just blaring music. You have to yell at each other. Yeah, so eating out in the city, that I borrowed from React Rally. And we also gave our speakers some spending money in the city, because when you go to speak, you don't want to leave with less money than you came. That's kind of annoying. That's the whole idea. Is I can go for free. So yeah, that also I borrowed from React Rally.
Nice.
But one thing that was an original idea that I'm really proud of is we also had backup speakers. That's not original, but we recorded the backup speakers' talks last night. and they'll be put
Cool.
onto the YouTube channel
so
like
cool.
usual. And so
Okay.
I've been a backup speaker before, and it's you're in this weird place where you're like, I hope that somebody gets sick, but I actually don't. So
No COVID.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was one thing that I'm excited that they'll be able to be heard, right? Like they put a lot of work and effort into preparing those talks. So I also put the Twitter avatars on the badges.
That's
So-
also smart.
Yeah,
so
'cause-
people can recognize you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, unless your
Everybody
Twitter
has
picture is
picture,
like
yeah.
10 years before your current one, which I think many of us are like guilty
yeah.
of doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're
for
like,
sure.
We've definitely changed in the last 2 years of
A
not
lot.
going to conferences. So
Yeah,
at least I have.
Oh, same,
So,
same.
yeah.
same.
Yeah.
And plus the people with drawings too as their profile
That's true.
pictures.
Uh-huh.
That's fair, yeah.
That also really helps. When you
Yeah,
can see people.
yeah. So it was super fun, and after the conference day, now I have a lot of ideas of cool things that we'll do next year.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it keeps going tomorrow too. You all are doing the hangout day.
Yeah, yeah. So originally I wanted to take everybody to Lagoon. It's this theme park. You like go on roller coasters and
fun.
stuff. But they're only open on weekends in May. So
Oh, okay.
I'm
So that
somehow
didn't work.
unsurprised that
Yeah.
you wanted to take people to
Yeah.
an amusement park.
yeah, that's
Not
my jam.
surprised
That's like
at
that's what I do for fun. It's logistically challenging to do stuff like that.
Sure, yeah.
And so I was like, but I still want people to feel like they can go out and do something fun. And so I just came up with this idea to think of a ton of fun things that people could do and that they would do with each other if they just had like the inspiration to do that. And so we've got, I don't know, probably a list of 20 things and places people can go. And we had one person run a marathon actually on Saturday, like a half a marathon from that. And we had a bunch of people playing pickleball and disc golf already. And then tomorrow, and I actually went on a one-wheel ride with a bunch of folks today, which is sweet. And then tomorrow people are going to be going out and doing fun stuff. So, really, this is 100%, like I said, we're not making any money off this. In my mind, if we end up with more money than at the end of all of this, then that's a failure in my mind because we could have used that money to do something cooler for the conference. And so it's 100% huge thank you to the sponsors because this wouldn't have been possible without that. And we just want to get the community together and have like the conversations that you have in an in-person conference. So.
Cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Should we?
Well, yeah, let's-
talk to
Yeah,
some
let's
of
get
the
some
speakers?
speakers out.
Bring
Yeah.
us
I'm going to leave
speakers.
now. Thanks, everybody. And I'm going to hand this over to some speakers. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure, for sure. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
It's like hold music. I don't know what happens to that. It's a free for all.
Yeah.
Whoever wants to come up who's spoken. Henri!
Hello. Pick a mic. Pick a chair.
It's
oh,
on
yeah,
the side.
It should be on the. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Awesome.
Do you want to? Oh,
Hello, Henri.
we have liftoff.
Welcome.
Bonsoir. I mean, I gotta say good evening to both of you. I haven't seen either of you in like, well, years.
Yes,
It's been
exactly.
years, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean-
think we met for the first time in like Amsterdam before all of this craziness
I
happened.
feel like it was JS Conf EU.
Yeah, or the
Berlin.
Mozilla conference.
Yeah. Which
yeah.
one?
ViewSource?
I feel like. Oh, you are correct.
Yeah.
I think it was ViewSource, maybe.
Yeah.
I thought it was JConf EU.
But same
Either
thing.
way.
Same week. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm happy to see both you guys.
Yeah.
Ladies, pardon me. So it's been a hot minute. And I was
Yeah.
actually, when I found out this was happening, I'm like, oh my God, I totally remember this. Because I think I attended one, and I can't remember where it was, but it was a lot of fun then too.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
I think live podcasts are kind of cool.
Yeah, and a lot has changed for you. You're at Real Webpagetest now.
Yeah.
Hey,
You're doing
merci.
stuff there?
Yeah,
Yeah?
you know, having
Yeah.
fun.
Tell us
just-
more about
Yeah.
that.
And introduce yourself too. While
Oh,
you're
okay.
doing that,
Yes,
'cause
yes,
for
Um,
everybody
definitely.
who's listening,
seriously.
we know you, but
So hello, bonsoir, all the listeners out there. My name is Henri, and I'm mostly known as Henri Alverca on Twitter. That Netscape avatar that you thought you saw, you did see. And yeah, and I'm here at Remix Conf in Salt Lake City. And I spoke earlier today, and I talked about performance, but specifically with regards to a company I work for, which is Webpagetest by Catchpoint, and where we live and breathe performance, user experience, and in part developer experience now as well. So yeah, it's a pile of fun.
Yeah, it was cool to see you walk through the process of using real Webpagetest and the different parts of it that people might not be using. Because I think there are parts of Webpagetest that I'm like, let me just run it through and see what the LCP is, and that's all I care about, and that's it.
And I totally understand that. You know, that's something that we've, that's just natural. We've grown accustomed to with whatever product we use. It does something well that we like, and we just kind of, dive in and use it for that and just get out. But, considering the sort of like the environment that has been sort of created of late, where performance is really being discussed more prominently, I think there needs to be some discussion about like the features that are available to them that they might not know about, and specifically, what they do, and the biggest picture. I'd say bigger, but I think the biggest picture overall is what I talked about, which is performance literacy. I think that, I'm not saying it's not there, but generally I think it could improve. And that's going to be sort of like my mandate this year for sure, my campaign. And it's just to show people, have them understand what's going on, why they need to particularly pay attention to like one part, or understand what it means.
Definitely. I think especially in the framework space, like the CSS, HTML, JavaScript developers have always really talked about performance a lot, and those conferences always bring it up in a lot of their talks. But today was really unique at a React Remix conference to be speaking about performance in almost all of the talks. So I thought that was really cool and different compared to a lot of
it felt very perf now.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
It's, I have to say this, when I first found out that this conference was happening, it was immediately on my radar because I felt Remix was like buzzing. And I also felt that they had been so adamant and sort of, indicating to people, letting them know that they were pretty performant and using our tool, so I just could not miss that. But A, I was happy I came, and B, I remember maybe like 3 days out, I was looking at the actual speaker lineup and their abstracts, and I couldn't believe the amount of performance conversations that were taking place. And, I come from a moment in time where it was myself and that was it, and to have like ongoing talks about like little performance here and there, and your LCP is going to improve. And Divya, you might remember 2019 during my keynote. I said at Performance Now in Amsterdam, I said like, Lighthouse is largely responsible for what's going on in terms of like people chatting about it. And now you add Lighthouse, Core Web Vitals, and there's like a huge tent of people who are pretty interested. And that's why I think, when I joined Webpagetest, it was like the best time on earth to be into performance right now. There are so many people who want more information.
Yeah, and Lighthouse is such an entry point for so many people, but still so many people don't even know about that. Like I talk about it in some of my talks about like SEO and writing blog posts that are good. Just like, hey, also send your blog through a Lighthouse test because it will affect your Google ranking. And people are like, oh, I never heard about this before. So
it's interesting because Lighthouse, if I remember correctly, Lighthouse really started as like a PWA tool. And then they added like performance, SEO, best practices, accessibility, and the PWA is still there. And now it basically has been transformed, co-opted as a performance tool. Like no one cares about anything else. It's like, what's your Lighthouse score? And they're not like,
post it on Twitter.
Oh, here's my SEO score. Like SEO, what's that? What's your performance score, bro? So it's it has become synonymous to performance, which is really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where the people chose to take it. And now it's like, okay. And so today it was about like, okay, let me show you the details about these scores and these times that you see. And there's a lot more to it, you know. So it's, no, I had a great time today. You know, to open the post keynote talk, which again, I didn't know till about 48 hours before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
so, well, you know, is Kent still here? I was actually supposed to be a pre-recorded talk.
Oh, got it.
And then I got the call. They're like, you know, you've been supersized. You know,
You've been promoted.
yeah, you've been promoted.
Yeah.
And then I got the top slot, and I was like, all right, you know, let's go have some fun.
Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
then, so yeah, man, how you know, how are things?
Pretty good.
You know, you too. Like everything's love, work good.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Having lots of fun, building stuff, talking to people.
Yeah.
What else could you ask for, right?
I guess so.
I mean, it's interesting because I'm interested in the work that you do, and like Tim and the team that you are working with is wonderful at Real Webpagetest.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, at least looking at the trajectory that I've been moving towards. So I did a lot of front end, and now I'm pretty much full stack towards the end of the stack, not the front. And I'm actually curious if, from your experience and working on Real Webpagetest, what the trends look like as people start talking more about server-side rendered apps. You see Next.js bringing up their things, and Remix is doing, I guess they call themselves center stack, or I guess full stack. But I'm wondering if you see that in the trends, or at least in the data that you guys are collecting.
You know, the one thing that's a very interesting question, and you may get an even more interesting answer.
That's what I'm looking for.
You know, the one thing that I realized is that, you know, and having sort of run the Jamstack Toronto meetup and being exposed there, everything that's going on with, you know, what you discussed is still such a small part of the web. It's obviously very new, very, you know, well discussed, and you know, in our little bubble.
Yeah, definitely.
But you break out of that, and it's like, pff, you know, like this is not the
Yeah,
main
people
discussion.
are still building websites.
Oh yeah.
and
Totally. This is not the main
WordPress,
discussion.
yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
That's
so
true.
I'll be frank. I'm really spending a lot of time watching what's happening on the WordPress side. You know, because some of you may or may not know, last fall they officially announced a performance team, a core performance team. So I was like,
Oh,
my
that's
ears
cool.
were like, okay. And so I've been following them closely, you know. And I mean, I think I told this to someone earlier today. Douglas Crockford once said, you know, how's the quote go again?
There's
The
many
front
quotes
end
from-
is, how's it go? The front end is, like, basically the front end is like a disaster. You know what I mean? That's where your problems will keep coming up day in, day out. Not saying that, you know, with all that's happening, you know, in sort of like the modern development side, that, you know, we shouldn't keep an eye on that, but just, it's still such a small pie
Yeah.
that, you know, there's so many like bigger problems to take on, and they're more in the classic front end, back end split. You
Yeah,
know? So,
that's fair.
Yeah.
So what are you most excited about working on at Webpagetest now? Is there like a new feature that you're working on, or what's new? What's upcoming?
I mean, can I ask my lawyer first? You know?
Read your NDA over
Did you
again.
sign? Yeah, did you sign an NDA?
Okay, apparently nothing's happening. You know.
Okay, yeah.
You know, I will say this. You know, I get back to the literacy idea
Okay.
because that means it's like having workshops. You know,
Yep,
that
yeah.
means it's like presenting. That means it's, you know, being able to have conversations with people about performance where they can speak from like a more learned place. You know. And so this education that needs to take place, and that's going to take place this year, I think is a lot of fun. You know, it's almost like, you know, the early days, say, of like Jamstack. You're like, oh, this is kind of
Yeah.
interesting. And then watching it sort of like snowball into what it is now, and the whole just idea, Again, I know people argued about the name and yada yada yada. I started to call it like just a modern stack, like what is going on? It's modern development. Let's go, So, but yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm excited about helping people sort of like unlock, when they're looking at like data, and metrics, to be like, oh, I know what's going on here.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because as long as we're building for the web, regardless of what framework, stack,
100%.
technology, whatever, it's always just the browser's gonna render it and performance is gonna come into play.
And you're just gonna wait for the results. That's it. So I think that's. Pardon me?
No, I said that's great, and the literacy will always need. There's always a need there.
Yeah.
And
I mean, just like any web development, it's like there's literacy that needs to be achieved for people to be able to speak in that sort of like confidence, where like, oh, here's what's going on there, and and I have to give a shout out to my team. Everyone out at WPT, as we call it. Tim, Scott, Jeff, JQ. Gina, God, Michaela, William.
All the other people.
The entire Catchpoint team.
Oh, I mean, Catchpoint is like,
overarching.
and the Webpagetest is like, like this. But we're trying to do great work, and hopefully people could come along, and be part of it.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's
awesome. Exciting.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I'll be on your podcast soon.
Yeah.
I would love to have you at some point.
Really
that would be great.
Yeah,
something a bit more formal. Like I've been having some back channel talks.
All right.
But we could continue that afterwards.
We'll keep talking.
Yeah.
I got some paperwork we could sign.
Perfect.
You know what I'm saying? So let's go. All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for talking with us.
No, by all means, man. Ladies, thank you. Who's up next?
I think
there we go. Story blocks in the building. Let's go.
Hey, how's it going?
Is it on?
Oh, there
It
you
should
go.
work now.
It might take a couple seconds.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, we can hear you. Perfect.
Sorry about that. It's almost the end of the day.
Yeah.
Had to take my
Audio
time to figure
video, it's always the hardest part of any conference. So shout
welcome.
out to all these people here.
Yeah. Arisa, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to introduce yourself? And I know you gave the story block talk, so can you speak more to that as well?
Sure. So my name is Arisa, and I'm originally from Japan, but living in Germany. So Storyblock is a headless CMS, and I work in there as a developer relations engineer, and not just only headless CMS. What it makes it being unique is that we have the real-time visual editor. So whatever you make the content changes, you can take a look at it and see in one screen. And we're based on the atomic design methodology, means that you can reuse the components as many as you want, and you can nest these reusable components in any levels. So you can only, for example, like define only necessary components that you need. Then you don't need to duplicate unnecessary, overwrapped components. So that's what we have in here. For today's talk, I was showing that, the, let's say, choices of choosing the technologies will do matter of your UI and UX. So I was showing as one of the example that imagine that if you are, for example, like in your everyday life, when you face something non-user-friendly interface, then maybe in the end you will be able to get something you wanted to have, but the journey until you will be able to get these, let's say, the things you wanted to have or the things you wanted to achieve, it's not going to be nice. So same thing could be transferred or like would be applied for, let's say, like in tech world. So I was showing like how resilient, fast, very smooth and organized experience you can get from, let's say, Storyblock and the Remix. Because on the fly, Remix already provides a very nice way to dynamically handle the routes. So let's say like anyone who doesn't have the developer experience, they can easily create nested routes dynamically from, let's say, the dashboard and the visual editor, and developers can, focus on their own work, stuff like that. So that's something what I was giving a talk today. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So that means like with the way the way you're using or Storyblock works with Remix is, can you speak more to that? It's just like the routing layer and how the components get loaded.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So the thing is, like, once you define the components from the Storyblock side,
Yeah.
by giving a name of the component and by giving the levels of the components, how you want to nest, and the next step you can do at the Remix side is that, well, you can, first of all, like, define the component to be dynamically being rendered.
Okay.
And to do that, we provide the JSON files for draft version and the published version. And then
For draft and publish, there's separate JSON files.
Mm-hmm. So if you want to see, for example, cleaner version of the draft JSON, you can just take a look at the published version, because for draft version, we have additional property to show all these components are editable. But you don't need to see that in published components.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
So
because it's a post. So if someone were publishing like a blog or something, I mean, with Storyblock, that's what you're doing, right?
Got
so
it.
Yeah.
CMS. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
So what you can do, or what you can take a look at from these, let's say, draft JSON, is that you can see all the components are in an array object. So you can see that if you want to dynamically return these components, you can actually use the map to, render
Wait,
automatically.
sorry, say that again.
Oh, sorry. You can.
Can you speak slightly louder? I can't hear.
Sorry.
It's like the music is
Oh,
getting
yeah. Don't worry, you're not the only one asking. I tend to speak, smaller. So
You can also move the mic closer, and that might help. But
yeah, I do my best. So you can actually map these, array object, so that you don't have to worry about to manually create, for example, like, let's say, the component files, and then need to worry about to create the logic to manually, render these components. You can just call one API that is provided from our SDK. In Remix case, you can just use our React SDK. So you can call one of the APIs that is fully equipped to handle all the dynamic, let's say, component rendering part. So conditionally, it will decide, like, if there is, like, the dynamic components are there, then it's going to return. But if not, then maybe you can put some nice error handling to show, like, hey, the name of the component doesn't exist, stuff like that. And you don't have to, worry about to build these kind of, let's say, workflow by yourself. You can just call this API, and you just, like, call this API as a JSX component, and everything is all set. So you don't need to worry about what kind of components the users are going to define, let's say, inside of another components. Everything is already set in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. How have you been enjoying, like, the conference and working with Remix?
Oh, I am really enjoying a lot, and I need to say that, or I need to insist that this is one of the best conference I've ever attended. I mean, this is my third time, like, joining in-person conference.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, ever.
Ever, yes.
cool.
Ever.
Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, because I started to speak in conferences like after the pandemic. So I attended more online conferences as speakers, so as attendees. So this is my third time, but even so, it's really like one of the special ones, because I mean, like, I feel that I know a lot of, not just the speakers, but even the attendees. I got a chance to, be able to talk to them. So I feel like I know more of, let's say, the folks joining in here closely, as well as, like, I was able to, like, do some funny or, like, fun activities. For example, like, I was going to the dinner, and there was a Kent he was asking like, do you want to do like one wheel? Then I'm like, oh yes, please, I really want to do that.
The one wheel has been really popular.
Yeah, I'm terrified though. Like, absolutely not. So I'm impressed by your bravery.
Yeah, so I'm really enjoying the conference itself. I mean, the talk was also like, went really smooth. The reason why I'm saying is that, well, Michael from Remix team, he knows because we attended in another conference together in Amsterdam. And funny thing is, like, during my talk, there was a fire alarm going on, and there was like, yes, for some reason, the monitors on the stage, it really hated my laptop to, connect it. So I had like, I think anything that I could, get, to be stressed out. So compared to that, Remix Conf went really smooth. And yeah, I simply really enjoyed.
That's rough. That's rough. Anything smooth compared to that. But it's been an awesome event. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, this is really I've only used Storyblock as is, but never with Remix. So this is actually really interesting, and your talk was very informative. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Yeah.
It's totally
like
up to you.
Musical chairs of pick your own adventure.
Wow, this mic looks like it's been beat up.
Ooh,
I'm kind of scared of the previous people that were talking here.
I think that was a result of a mic drop, potentially.
Oh, yeah, an actual
I
mic
would
drop,
imagine.
Yeah, a literal one.
Yeah, so this is web speed test. Boom. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so if you want to, I don't want to say the AV people might kill me for letting you mic drop. So maybe don't do that. But
yeah, probably a bad idea.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks
I
for
think
being
this is
on.
the first time I've met both of you, so a pleasure to be here.
Yeah,
you
super
too.
nice to meet you too. Do you want to introduce yourself to the listeners as well, and maybe give the Cliff Notes version of your talk from today too?
Okay, well, it all started when I was born. No. The Cliff Notes version of me, my name is Anthony Frainer. That's a really tough last name, so that's how you say it. I've been working at Shopify for only about 6 months or so.
Oh, wow, okay.
Oh, wow.
But at Shopify, I have the privilege of working with a group of really intelligent, smart people working on a brand new framework called Hydrogen. And Hydrogen's kind of the whole thing behind Hydrogen was just making headless e-commerce for Shopify better. And along with big bets on React server components and things like that. My task lately has been to kind of take that value that these intelligent people have worked on for making headless e-commerce better for Hydrogen, pull it out of Hydrogen and make it better for everyone now. The goal is to make it great for anyone, whether you're using Vercel or Remix or whoever.
So does that, when you say that, you mean make it agnostic?
Yeah.
Framework agnostic. Okay.
Yeah, React framework agnostic. And we have
Cool.
tentative grand plans for maybe even going outside of React and stuff, but we've got to take small steps before we can take those big ones. But
React's a pretty safe bet.
yeah, it's a good place to
the
start,
web
it feels
ecosystem.
like.
Yeah. For sure. That's awesome. That's really cool to hear about. The headless e-commerce space is so big right now. I have a good friend, Kelly Vaughn, who's very involved in the Shopify space, so I get to hear about it from her a lot. But it's really, really cool. Tell us about how Hydrogen works with Remix. Do you use it as your routing layer, or how does it work?
No, the goal for this package that we've been working on is essentially components. It's going to be called Hydrogen UI, so it is a separate package than Hydrogen itself. But yeah, so it's components and it's hooks and kind of the things that I showed in the talk as well that are helpful for GraphQL queries and things like that. And maybe there's some stuff in there that's useful for anything, like that GraphQL helper function that I showed that was hey, you're not using these fields in your GraphQL query. Maybe you should remove them, make your query more optimized. Stuff like that has the potential for just being, used anywhere that's you're querying GraphQL. And so again, there's lots of big plans, but we're still kind of pushing to try and get, our first release out, and then once that's done, now we can take a breath and then take a look at the wider ecosystem and say, how can we make things better for everybody? So
Yeah. I love how that's become such a strategy within the web dev space of having some open source or free project that just helps everybody, and then you still have a company behind it, but you have this product completely detached from it, from like Next.js and Vercel, for example. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, like you say, the open sourceness of everything and everything going open. And the other part, I'm fairly new to Shopify, so I don't want to like toe the line too much or whatever you want to call that. But there's a big emphasis on at Shopify of this isn't a zero-sum game, or in other words, we don't have to make it so we are the winner and everyone else is a loser. We want to make it so everybody wins if we can. And obviously, if we can do well in the process, that's great, and we can all have jobs and stuff. But the goal is to really just help out the broader ecosystem and help everybody. And you kind of see some of that not only in this work that we're doing in Hydrogen UI, but also just in React itself with like React Server components and things like that, providing feedback and trying to make that proposal better. So yeah.
So what's the, you've talked a bit about like making it React agnostic. So what are the plans so far? So you have it working with Remix, you have it working with, I guess, vanilla React and Next.js, I think, too. Is that
so the package itself isn't released yet. So that's the fun part. Is
Okay.
like this is
all,
yeah, this is all like almost feels like an Apple keynote of like, hey, this is where we want to be in maybe 6 months or less time, or but this is like a future-looking type feel to it. But the goal is to make it so it works in Remix, and kind of I alluded to in my talk as well, is like we really do want these tight integrations with other frameworks to make sure that we're doing it right for you. So in fact, last week we noticed that Netlify, for example, had built a hydrogen adapter for their new Netlify edge computing that's built on Dino and stuff like that. We noticed that we had broken something in their adapter through one of our releases and hadn't really paid attention. And so we fixed it, but then we also worked with Netlify to say, hey, we're now going to do preview, like deploys on every commit, so we can check out Hydrogen on Netlify and make sure it's working there and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a goal to just make it work everywhere eventually. But
so is there actually, are you working with different like deployment platforms to make sure that Hydrogen works on them, or because there's obviously intricacies to how that works? So what's that process like? Yeah,
it's been interesting, and again, most credit goes. It hasn't been me. I've just been sitting in the background. Most credit goes to the intelligent team that I'm a part of. But yeah, we've worked very closely with Cloudflare specifically to make sure things work there, and having Slack channels where we can talk and collaborate and make sure things are working well. Shopify itself is actually working on its own deployment platform, and so that's another place where we've been working with our own internal team to be like, okay, well, is this working there? And having preview deploys, and so
Super interesting. Remind me to talk to you about AWS.
Okay, yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah. What are you excited to work on since you just started on Hydrogen, and like what's the thing that most excites you about that project?
The most exciting thing about Hydrogen for me is I really enjoy working on developer tooling and making just developers' lives better. And so I really like working on things like right now, currently, we have Vite under, as our bundler and doing all that stuff. And we have a super intelligent person, Fran, that has all that integration. And I'm just absorbing all of that knowledge, trying to absorb all that knowledge from these people and learning how to make, Vite, make Hydrogen run better and stuff like that. So I really enjoy developer tooling and standard specs. That's more outside of Hydrogen, but yeah, like working on standards is kind of weird, but I actually really enjoy that stuff too. And I've only done a tiny bit of it, but when I do it, it's super satisfying. So I'm kind of weird that way.
There's something really awesome about building developer tools as a developer yourself, and like being able to work on something that's for your persona. And so it sounds like you get to do that at your job.
Yeah, a little bit, and it is super fun. And like I said, I get to learn from these super intelligent people. And when I have time, I go out and look at these new proposals that are happening and try to provide feedback where I can and things like that. So, working on the current one I'm excited about now is like this new app history or a navigation API for the web to kind of replace history.pushState and all that stuff. And so there's a lot of work going on there. And again, I'm not doing much there, but I'm just sitting there kind of in the background watching and learning and maybe once every month or so being like, hey, what about this type thing? But yeah.
That's
Did you
super
work on
interesting.
e-commerce prior to Shopify itself, or like e-commerce dev tooling itself?
So unintentionally, I have worked in doing a lot of e-commerce throughout my job history, I guess, but it was never intentional. It's just that's what I always happened to be working on. So my first job was working for a local company here and making their website and migrating it from Magento to Shopify, which at the time, I had no idea I was going to be working for them. And then another company I worked for, local, building a custom platform to integrate all these different e-commerce things into like a dashboard so you can see how well your products are selling and stuff like that. So it's kind of been like an accidental, like, hey, I kind of understand e-commerce, I guess.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's interesting because developer tools itself is a niche in and of itself in all of development, and then e-commerce dev tools is like a niche within that niche because it's very specific. The problems that people have in e-commerce when they build e-commerce sites are very different than if they were building another type of website, right? So
yeah, totally, and that's one of the reasons I think for me Remix really stood out is e-commerce is so focused on performance, so focused on how well is your website running and time to first byte and SEO stuff, and Remix just seems like a great fit for that, and hopefully Hydrogen is too, and so yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for chatting with us. It was awesome to meet you.
Thank you very much.
yeah, thanks. Who's next? Wait, are we done? Oh, okay. Sweet.
Hey, how's it going? I need to turn it on. Just takes a second. There you go.
All right,
There
we're
you
good
go.
now.
You're on. How's it
Awesome.
going?
Good. I guess I've never met you guys, so I'll introduce myself
Yeah,
to
that'd be
you.
awesome.
My name's Emily Kaufman. I was one of the backup speakers from yesterday.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
So kind of courted me over there and was like, hey, there's a podcast going on. So,
Perfect.
Welcome.
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah,
it's nice to meet
welcome.
you guys.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and then also what your talk was about?
Sure. So my name's Emily. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I work for a company called Harvey, which is a grocery delivery service.
Okay.
Where all of the food comes from local farms and producers.
Oh, cool.
So we've spent the last 2 years doing performance, and that kind of led us to Remix in the past couple of months. So that's basically what I've been doing, is writing our site in Remix, and it's been awesome. It's been a lot of fun.
That's so cool. It's really cool to hear about a company using Remix in production too, because it's pretty new as far as these dev tools go. I would love to hear about your experience there and what the challenges were, but also the really high points as well.
So we're not quite to production
Not
yet.
quite to production. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
So it's a big Symfony application. So over the last year, we've been slowly moving it to React. So we have it in React now, and so we have been doing comparisons of our existing React site into what it would look like in Remix. And the high points have just been, I guess you guys were talking about Lighthouse scores.
Yeah.
Ours was a 32 without Remix. Using the same components, it was a 97.
Wow, that's huge.
Okay.
Yeah. So that kind of stuff has been really exciting for me, just seeing like those changes, and that was not that many weeks of work to get it to that point. So
Had you used another framework prior to Remix? What was the reason for reaching for it in the first place?
I mean, part of it was I did it on a weekend because I wanted something to play with.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I bet this would be pretty cool. And I showed it to my boss, and he was like, wow, yeah, we should try to keep working on this and just see, because performance has always kind of been an issue with our application. Because it used to be a small, if you're familiar with like a CSA, it's a yeah, community supported agriculture, where you kind of get like a box from a farm.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, before the pandemic, we had like 40 products that you could get, and because everyone wanted grocery delivery service, we grew to like 500 products over the last short amount of time, and it kind of crashed our page. So that was one of the reasons we were looking for something to help with that performance.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak more to the stack, or like what it was like before you moved to Remix itself? And what that migration was like. I mean, you haven't pushed to production, but I'm just curious what that process was like.
So we've been just kind of, they were all Twig templates originally. So we kind of set up a React, like a single page application. And it was kind of like intertwined with the Symfony application. And then as part of our performance stuff we were doing, we kind of split out our admin code versus like our member code. So I'm just focusing on member right now. But I built a components library, so I was able to pull out a bunch of like the buttons and all of that stuff. So that made it a lot easier to move over.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
I just like basically set up all these new routes that matched what we had.
Because you already had the component
and
library.
I already had the components, yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to do that anyway for fun, but this was like a good way to justify it and say like it'll make it take a lot less time if we can just have a lot of that.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, it's been fun.
So I guess it didn't take any convincing really for the team to move to it.
I don't exactly know the story, but I guess my COO hired Ryan at one point in the past.
Oh wow.
And so I was working on trying to figure out how to convince everyone that we should move to Remix.
Okay.
And my COO posts in our Slack channel, it's like, hey, have you guys heard about Remix? I think we should use it. And I was like, actually,
were you using React Router before? Yeah. Okay, so I guess then it's sort of related. Yeah. Okay.
And I'm excited about the new. So we're on an older version of React Router, and since they just released that upgrade path, I've started working on that.
Oh, cool.
Okay. So you know, maybe I'll just like switch some of it to Remix, and no one will notice.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps if you have the infrastructure in place, or you are already using React Router, because then it sort of integrates really nicely with Remix.
Right.
Instead of having to like, you aren't using it and then you move to. I'm actually curious about that migration strategy.
Yeah,
I'll have to find someone who has done that. And
our member site is a single page application. Our admin is not. It's just like we're not using React Router there. So that is something I'm
So that one
trying to
is
figure
using
out.
Remix also, or will be?
It's not using Remix yet, but I think it will eventually.
Cool.
I'm trying to figure out if we need to do like a rewrite of just everything to get it. 'Cause it's just it's like Twig. A lot of it's just Twig templates and PHP, which I can scroll through if I need to. But
Rad. Nice.
Yeah, I think Shandai called the people who write PHP dinosaurs earlier, so that's me, I guess.
I was like, there are people who write PHP. The Laravel community is huge, by the way, and there are people who still write Laravel, and they are very interesting, awesome communities. So, I don't know, I take issue with that comment personally. So,
that's funny. But cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for chatting with us. It was really cool to hear your story.
It's nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you. Cool. Do we have one more? Or are we? Okay, cool.
Oh,
or do we have two more?
Yeah. You can come up. Yeah, Michael can close, I guess.
Michael can close. Yeah. Perfect close. Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
We have time. I don't think we have a plan.
You just have to turn them on. They're turned off.
Yeah, there's a switch.
There you go. There you go. You got it.
Hello?
Figured it out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think if you speak a little louder.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
Hello.
You're on.
My name is Aaron Saunders. I was one of the backup speakers also. I did not get promoted.
All right.
I still did my speak last night.
Yeah.
I found that about Remix through just evaluation of software.
Okay.
I run a software development firm in Washington, D.C., and we are always trying to find the cheapest, most effective way to kind of build solutions for clients. And I saw the post, and so I started playing with it for a weekend. And then I have a YouTube channel, so I did a couple of videos on it.
That's awesome.
And then when I think Kent mentioned that they were going to do the conference, he said, hey, you should, go for a talk. And so I did. I threw my hat in the ring. I didn't make the final cut, but I was just happy to be here. I haven't spoken at a conference in almost 15 years now.
Oh, wow. Wow,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So, and it's one of the things that when I talk to kids and other folks getting into tech, I always say, you got to just put yourself out there.
Yeah,
so I figured I
definitely.
need to eat my own dog food and put myself out
Yeah.
there. So.
Well, a YouTube channel is as well. Like,
Yeah, but a YouTube channel, you can sit at home, and if you don't like something, you can cut it and you can edit it. So it's a lot different than standing up
Yeah.
in front
But
of a bunch of people talking.
still a lot of work.
It
Yeah.
is definitely
Yeah.
a lot of work, but I enjoy it because my whole passion thing is about getting more folks into tech, specifically black and
Yeah.
brown folks into tech.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Tell us about your talk. What did you speak about?
So my talk was about parameterized routes and nested routes in Remix.
Okay.
It was something that even when I was trying to learn it, reading through the documentation, I found it a little bit challenging to understand. My big thing on my YouTube channel is to take topics or technology that I don't want to offend anyone, but normal people won't normally run into,
Yeah.
and kind of expose it to them, but explain it to a way that they'll at least get excited enough to try it. And so that's kind of what I did.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
What was can you speak to that pain points that you had when you were learning Remix?
It wasn't
What
that much.
was that like?
It wasn't that much of a pain point for me, but I think, no offense to anyone, I think a lot of the assumption when you read this stuff is that you know a lot of technology.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
like there's almost kind of this like closed group of, are you smart enough to understand this technology? And if
Yeah.
you're not,
Yeah.
step to the side. And
I think
so-
in general because I think it's just like to what level or how deep do you get
Yeah.
when you explain something? Do you
For
go all the
sure.
way to like fundamentals, or
No,
do you just
no,
assume
when
it's
I try to assume that so I do stuff on React and I do stuff on Vue.
yeah.
So I
Cool.
assume that you know what React is, and I assume you know
Yeah.
what Vue is. And then I just try to break it down to simpler concepts. And I also kind of like to give a lot of references to other things for people to look at,
Yeah.
to try to just build upon the concepts.
Yeah.
But it's really about just breaking down that kind of initial fear that people have of trying something new in technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great sign that you know something really well too, because if you can explain something complex to a beginner, there's no better way of showing that you really understand that thing. It's challenging. It's
Right.
hard.
I taught at the college level for a little while, and so I like people to ask questions, because then through the questions you get the feedback and you get better at explaining things.
Yeah. You find out the common pain points that
Yes,
other
the
people
common
are
pain
having.
points that other people will have. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Go for it.
From your since you're a teacher or someone who's naturally inclined towards educating or documenting and talking about your process, so from your experience when it comes to, since you had comments around how the docs for Remix works, where do you think that line is when you have to explain concepts, like especially because Remix introduces some newer ways of render? It's like route-based rendering, which is pretty atypical for frameworks, right? So where do you think the explanation needs to go? Not specific to Remix, but in general, if you were to.
I think it's almost unlearning some of the other stuff that you've learned and getting back to the basics, which are one of the things that I liked about Remix. Like, they take away a lot of the complexity of things.
Yeah.
But a lot of those things are things that when you've read other articles and saw the things, you had to learn that, so you get in a specific mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
So.
I think it's always funny when they bring up a lot of new developers have used event.prevent default on every form that they've ever made. And I think that's so funny. It's kind of like an older developer now, I feel like. But it's
you
probably
see
true
it-
for a lot of people.
You see it in all the demos and all this code. It's always like, well, remember you have to do event.
Yeah,
prevent default.
always.
Always. So
But
it's
you
just kinda
don't,
hard to-
actually,
You don't.
yeah.
A lot of things, it doesn't matter anymore. So, but overall, I think I've had a great experience. Like I said, it's been years since I've spoke at a conference. It's been since before COVID, since I've actually been at a conference. And so, this is a great kind of first step back in. And then also just excited. It was great for the opportunity to talk, because honestly, pre-COVID, I had decided that I was going to start getting back out and doing, speaking at conferences and, trying to that's when I really got into promoting my YouTube channel and stuff like that.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank you.
chatting with
Yeah,
us.
thank
This is
you.
great to meet with you, and we'll definitely shout out your YouTube channel in the show notes. The lights are so bright.
Yeah, it's actually making me really hot. Like, I'm pretty hot.
Yeah. I'm like, I can't look in that direction.
Yeah.
Hey,
Right here. How about that?
perfect,
You
amazing.
can just block the light.
You don't
Actually,
even need a
that would
mic.
be great.
You're like,
That's why I'm not looking at anyone. It's not because I dislike looking at you,
Yeah.
but
Hello.
yeah.
I don't think you need an introduction, but
Long time follower, first time caller.
Wait, have you never been on the podcast?
I no. So I can't remember.
we have to have you
I-
on that.
I think I might have been
because I
on
think we had we
JS party, but
JS
it
party?
might have
had
been
an
like,
episode on React Router. I think
yeah.
at one point, and I think
This
you were
sounds
on
familiar. Maybe it was like a couple years ago.
it. Probably.
Yeah.
But welcome.
Well, cool.
Regardless.
It's good to be back.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
We'll have to
Yeah.
look it up.
Yeah.
And link the episode if
But
there
thank you for having me regardless.
you. For sure. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, it's been an awesome event, and your keynote this morning was really great as
Thank
well. You give a really great introduction to the history of Remix and the thought behind it, and then also where it is now. And I think that was a really great story for people. Do you want to give us the short lightning talk version
The
of
short
that
version
now?
of it?
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah. So thank you, by the way, for the compliment. So the short version of the story is, we, a couple years ago we had this, we've been developing React Router for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Ryan and I were always kind of hoping that somebody would just sort of pick it up and run with it and take it to the next level and say, because we saw so much potential for everything that we're doing now with Remix, right? Code splitting by route and, data loading by route and loading and unloading styles by route and all of the stuff that you can do with React Router, but nobody was actually doing anything with it. And it wasn't for lack of trying either. I had tried to convince various people, to use it, and it just wasn't catching on. I tried to convince the Redwood JS team to use it. I tried to convince the Next people to use it. Actually, the Next, the top issue on the Next issue tracker for a number of years was use React Router, because I think the React community actually really liked it, but it just never happened. At one point, I was talking to them about possibly doing some consulting. Anyway, it never happened. And so when COVID hit and our training business kind of took a big hit, we were just kind of like, well, I guess if nobody else is going to do it, I guess we should just do it, And along the way, we're going to do all this other good stuff too, which is stuff that we really believe in. We're going to do progressive enhancement, and we're going to make sure that it's back-end agnostic and it runs in lots of different places, and just a lot of different sort of opinions that we've had that we just wanted to put in there as well,
Awesome.
So.
Awesome.
Yeah, since you mentioned the Next thing,
Yeah.
I actually want
Yeah.
considering the announcement that came out yesterday around
Yeah.
what Next was doing, and I saw some comments
Yeah.
around whether or not there was some inspiration taken from React Router
Yeah.
or not. Do you want to speak to that and how that influences what you guys are
I
doing?
think they were very forthcoming about it.
Yeah.
On Twitter, at least.
There- yes.
Not in the RFC, unfortunately.
yeah.
But yeah, on Twitter, Sebastian came out and said, "Oh yeah, we took some inspiration from React Router."
Yeah, yeah.
Which I think is pretty obvious to anybody who is kind of paying attention to the space. But I honestly, I wasn't too miffed about it. The goal of Remix is not like we have said since day one, build better websites, sometimes with Remix.
Yeah.
But and I mean it. I really do mean it. So if we have a good idea that is nested routing, which I really love, And you know, the next team is far enough along with their implementation that I don't actually think it makes sense for them to use React Router at this point.
Sure,
because
yeah.
because the router is such an integral part of a framework.
Yeah.
I don't think it would make any sense. They would have to like have massive deprecations and huge breaking
Yeah.
changes for their whole user base, and it would be a huge pain. So if they want to just sort of take one, you know, sort of core idea, which is nested layouts,
Yeah.
which has been a huge pain point in Next for a long, long time, and they want to put that in the framework, I applaud them for it. I say, go for it. I will say that we've been thinking about nested routing for a long, long time, and literally everything we're doing in Remix is coupled with the nested routing. So, you know, the suspense that we're doing, the data fetching that we're doing, even our data mutations, even things like styling, the code splitting, like everything is coupled to the nested routing architecture, which, you know, I don't know if they have plans to like go all the way down that rabbit hole, but it goes quite deep. We're satisfied with it. You know, we're satisfied with how well it's worked out for us, and hopefully it works out well for them too.
Yeah, I would say inspiration is the best form of flattery. So, I mean,
Yeah,
if they,
right on. Absolutely, right?
So if they took some inspiration, I mean,
Definitely.
it is an open source project, so technically it's a free for all.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
You'd
like I'm
say.
not gonna get upset about somebody like copying an idea from my MIT licensed code. You know, like that's like I do that all the time. I look at people's code and I'm like, that's rad. I'm gonna do it like that. You know.
Yeah, and React Router is such a huge part of the React community as well. Like we all grew up using React Router kind of. So yeah.
Cool.
I'm sure it's a huge inspiration. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, the router really has been like it's been interesting to work on the router because I think at first we've been through several iterations, and to be totally honest, we didn't know what we were doing. Like the first couple of times around, we were learning React just like everybody else. I still remember when the very first person came along and said, "Hey, I want to do server rendering with React Router," and it was like, what? Like we hadn't even thought about that part yet. You know, it was just kind of this little niche thing that we didn't. You know, Facebook wasn't actually server rendering with React Router. They had their whole XHP backend, and so I didn't. Anyway, we had to like evolve to support that. We had to figure that out. There were just silly bugs and things that we were doing early on, but it really has been a huge privilege to work on that project for so many years. I think we really, really finally hit it on the head with V6, though. I have to say, like it.
That's awesome.
We sat on V5 for like 5 years. Because prior to that, we had been kind of accused of like, oh, you're moving too quickly, and I'm kind of getting exhausted with all the API change, and so I was really, really shy to push another major version until I was sure, like this time for sure,
This is it.
I got it right. This is it. No more. And I have to say, like, I'm really proud of V6. There's a lot of stuff in V6 that like we haven't even really talked about that much. But I think it's a good sign that like people are just quietly like shipping it and not having huge problems with it or huge issues with it. That's always a great sign, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's just working for everybody. That's good.
There aren't people yelling at you on Twitter about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it's you know, we have like a really, really great story for upgrading from V5, which I think is, you know, huge. Like we care a lot about backwards compatibility. One of the coolest features in V6 is all of your routes and your links are all relative and it all works. So you can actually build like tiny React Router apps. Like you could be on the ads team and you could be on the messenger team and somebody else could be on some completely different team. And you're just working on the routes at, you know, /admin/ whatever. And then you're working on the routes at /messages/ whatever. And you can stitch those apps together into a larger app, you know? So I think organizationally, that's how lots of companies are split up, you know, by product, by like focus. And I think the router now is a lot more conducive to, working in those large organizations, which I think is pretty awesome. That was a specific design goal of V6, for example.
An interesting thing that I think it was Eric's talk where he talked about the state machines piece.
Yeah.
So one thing that at least for me has been coming up is just the persistence question in terms of when you use Remix and you want a persistence layer with it. You end up having, I think Eric's demo used cookies.
He's using the cookies. Yeah.
I think some people might use IndexedDB maybe, potentially.
Yeah.
So like, is there, or with Remix, have you guys been thinking about that particular question as to like how people will be answering that data persistence question?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so in the early days of like Rails, when Rails first came out, I remember the first time I used Rails, I could use MySQL or Postgres or SQLite. And SQLite was kind of the one that it shipped with because that was pretty easy. They could just like create a file and that was fine. And then if you wanted to like get serious, you like, get your Postgres database and then you could connect to that, right? And I think now, like, we have seen such a proliferation of databases and data architectures.
It's pretty hot now.
Obviously, you've got NoSQL. Lots of people are just like, oh, I'm just going to use a key value store. Maybe you've got an Elasticsearch database. Maybe you've got a JSON API that you're talking to. Like, there's, Firebase. There's many.
There's also like this resurgence of SQLite where everyone wants to use SQLite now.
Yeah.
And in the browser too.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Exactly. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, you all at Fly are doing a lot
we're
with
using.
SQLite.
Yeah, exactly. We have Lightstream now.
Kurt
so
actually
SQLite,
convinced me to. I have like a version of Unpackaged that one of these days when I'm going to get like some free time, I'm actually going to ship it, I promise. But it's all built with SQLite as a cache.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's really cool. But I love SQLite. But the point that I was trying to make is there are so many different options, right, for data persistence. And I have no idea, honestly, what you need for your app. There are just so many different options. And so what we're doing as of now, as of Remix V1 and for the foreseeable future, is we just want to give you the right touch points so that you can access your data really, really easily, right?
Okay.
So all we care about is when are you loading the data? When are you actually running your queries? And then also, like, if some of those backends are slow, how can you return a response to the user really quickly without having to wait on them, right? So that's the streaming work that we're doing. But the pattern in Remix is kind of like called like back end for the front end. I don't know if you've ever heard that pattern before, but it actually works out really, really nicely, right? So if you have your data in Postgres or you have your data on GitHub and a JSON API or something that you built, a GraphQL API, it doesn't really matter. What we care about is, that we can run all of the queries for all of your nested routes in parallel, and that we can go in and generate the page. Now, again, like I was saying, if some of them are slow, that's cool too. Like, we'll very soon in Remix, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to ship support for React 18 streaming. You'll be able to stream down the pieces of the page that are already ready, and then just await the pieces that aren't. But I think that's the right level of abstraction in a world where we literally have no clue how you're storing your data. We're just going to help you decide, give you the right hook essentially to say, okay, we're ready for some data. You now take it from here,
Yeah. So then Remix will basically be more like a framework, and then you kind of pick and choose what your deployment platform is, as well as your database as a service, whatever that may be. And so you're like essentially the client, whoever is using Remix, will have to make those decisions separately.
Yeah, you were saying earlier, like, we call ourselves kind of center stack. And I think this really kind of gets to it, right? Because we're not super opinionated about where you host. We love Fly. We also love AWS. We love Google Cloud. Like, we people deploy on Vercel, Netlify. It's totally cool, right? We're kind of back-end agnostic. We're database agnostic. But what we do care a lot about is the network tab. Which is the thing that tends to come in between the back end and the front end, right? It's like
communication middle layer.
Yeah, exactly. How are you, how and when are you loading your data? How and when are you doing mutations? How does that affect how you need to reload data? And bust the cache, things like that. We also, a short-term goal of ours is also to be front-end agnostic. So we do not consider ourselves a React framework. We love React, and I think React makes a great set of trade-offs, personally. For everything I've used, I think it's amazing. But I totally get it that some people don't want that, or some people want a much smaller version. Maybe they want to use Preact, maybe they like Vue or Solid or something like that. Svelte or whatever, So I really don't care what you want to use for templating. You could even just say, I don't want to run any JavaScript on my site at all, which we saw quite a few people do today. I thought that was kind of a fun little theme, kind of a little, it was like a little bonus to everybody's talk. They're like, oh, and by the way.
Turn off JavaScript.
Yeah, and it still worked, right? So that's, I think, why we call ourselves Center Stack, is because we fit right in that. That's the part that we really, really care about, that we, want to provide some structure around, is what happens in between the front and the back end, and then pick whatever you want on either of those sides,
Cool. Well, you gave a little bit of an answer to this in the last question, but kind of as our final question before we wrap up.
Sure.
Can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek at the vision and the roadmap for Remix at all?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So we've actually got quite a few things that we would like to build. And I think kind of depends a little bit kind of who you ask, but so one of the things that I'm really, really interested is in seeing how many different places we can actually run Remix, and how many different use cases that we can serve, right? So right now we actually serve, the kind of traditional SSR use case pretty well. But, and we can also do really well, the very traditional, full page reload whenever I make a mutation or a request, right? Just leave scripts off the page, right? One use case that I actually think would be really cool for us to be able to serve is, what happens when, more of a Create React app style app, right? We heard John Jensen today talking about a bunch of folks at Netflix, bunch of folks at Netflix.
Netlify plus Netflix.
They boot their Create React app, they ship that, and it's just a client side thing, right? And that's a totally legit way to build apps, right? I would love to have better support for that. I would love to have better support for so-called offline apps, right? Or PWAs, right? That if you look at the Remix server runtime, it's actually pretty cool because the whole thing is just built on web primitives, which we polyfill on Node, because Node obviously doesn't have a lot of that stuff. So we polyfill it on Node. A lot of that stuff is already present, though, in Cloudflare workers. It's present in Dino. We heard from Ryan Dahl today. Guess where they're also present? In the browser, in the service worker environment, right? What if you could run the Remix server in the browser? Right?
Crazy.
Right? Yeah, but you could keep the same programming model. Right? This is the exact same programming model. Request, response, maybe your data store is IndexedDB, or maybe your data store is just some JSON API, which you can absolutely hit from a service worker that's running right there in the browser. Right? So it's just sort of moving these server environments are kind of funny. You can run it on the origin, you can run it in the CDN now with Cloudflare workers or something like that, and you can also run it right there in the browser. I thought it was actually kind of interesting. One of the big inspirations for the Remix backend was the fact that Cloudflare workers actually used the service worker API, and so it felt like you were coding a service worker, but it's running on the CDN. But if you're still using that same API, why not just bring it all the way to the client, right? I have a good friend, James Long, who is building this app, called Actual. He's written a bunch of stuff. He wrote Prettier. He wrote this library called Absurd. What was it called? Absurd SQL. It was rad, actually, because it's absurd because so browsers have this thing called IndexedDB.
Yeah.
in all known implementations of IndexedDB, IndexedDB is built using SQLite.
Yeah.
But SQLite was deemed not a good fit for browsers because they needed more than one implementation in order to standardize something. So they said, we can't standardize SQLite in browsers, so we'll standardize IndexedDB instead. All the browser vendors went out and built IndexedDB on top of SQLite, but what he really wanted was SQLite. So then he built the SQLite implementation on top of IndexedDB. So he's got like
Very meta.
IndexedDB talking to he's got SQLite talking to IndexedDB, which
It's
is
a SQLite sandwich.
powered by SQLite.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
It's a SQLite sandwich.
Yeah.
Anyway, he built this app. He built this. That was his persistence layer for a finance app that he was building.
Okay.
Called Actual. That's why he called it absurd because it was
Yeah.
a sandwich.
Yeah.
But I would love people to be able to build apps like that with Remix, right? That would be totally awesome. If people were doing that. So basically, running it in more places. That's definitely one of our goals. Like I was talking about, being front end agnostic. That's definitely one of our goals. Another goal of ours is to, we really want to pave the way for React Router apps to become Remix apps. React and React Router give you a lot of leeway, right? You can build an amazing experience with React. You can also build a really terrible experience with React. And so what we want to do is, by building Remix, what we're hoping is we're kind of putting some of the bumpers on the bowling lane a little bit to help you roll a strike with React. So what we want to do is kind of pave the way for people who are using React Router to, give them a compiler, give them a server runtime, be this kind of center stack layer for them to help them build really, really great apps with it. So that's all the stuff that we're kind of focused on in the moment. And then, there are a couple of odds and ends, we really should have, a better story around image optimization that's, again, built on web standards.
Yeah.
We've, thought a lot about it, and we're, we should take care of that. But yeah, those are, I consider that stuff kind of like low-hanging fruit. And then another just a really big thrust of ours is just education. This conference, the meetup groups, the documentation that we're writing, Kent's working on an egghead course, just all of the stuff that it takes to just help people build great apps. Because right now, I feel like I kind of mentioned it in my talk. I feel like in some ways, we're still giving people a basketball and telling them to kind of do a slam dunk. But knowledge really is power. So the more our company can do to empower people, to give them the knowledge that they need to really take advantage of the tools that we're building, the better. So that's a huge focus of ours as well.
Cool.
Education.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think the Egghead course is live. I got an email about it today.
Yeah, it's live. We Kent, I think, was tweeting about it earlier today, and
Oh, and another one.
oh, we're gonna
And
make
another
one.
Another one. You heard it here first.
You know what?
folks.
Don't ask me what's going. Just ask Kent what's going on. He knows.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much. This has been an awesome
Yeah, it's been
conversation. I
sweet.
learned so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for
And
having me.
Thanks to the conference for having us as well.
Yeah, this
has
is
been
great.
A really
Thank
great
you.
episode. Yeah.
Cool. This is where I do this.